5:16 p.m. I would ask that the board consider the proposed agenda, and may I ask for a motion to accept the proposed
I'll
agenda?
make the motion to accept the proposal.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next point of business for today would be consideration of the organizational resolutions, which we've all had an opportunity to review. Rather than address them individually, I thought we might just consider them all in one. This is the consideration of the Executive Board, which is Resolution 123A, consideration of committees, Resolution 123B, consideration of endorsement of depositories, Resolution 2-23, consideration of engagement council, Resolution 3-23A, consideration of engagement of the CFO, Resolution 03-23B, and consideration of engagement of the auditors, Resolution 3-23C. I would like to ask for a motion to accept the resolutions on these organizational matters.
I'll make that motion, consider organizational resolutions, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The next matter would be a consideration of the minutes from our prior two meetings of December 5th and December 21st, Resolution 04-23. There's no comments regarding those minutes. I would ask for a motion to approve them.
Move to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There's no correspondence to consider today.
That's correct.
All right. And that brings us to a presentation from, I'm going to say Lenape / Doctor's Path. So if you could identify yourself and,
Yes, good evening. My name is Dan Deegan with the law firm Porcelli, Deegan, Trina in Uniondale, New York, on behalf of DNF Development and Lenape. I say it Lenape, I'm not sure exactly.
You say Lenape.
Lenape,
okay.
which is actually the two principals of DNF Development are Len and Peter. So that's,
Ah, okay.
is that a coincidence?
Right.
I've been at that.
Yes.
Okay, so
Except the
Lenape Indians, I guess, is where it comes from originally.
Okay.
Native Americans. So thank you guys very much for giving me the opportunity to present to you. You know, I think the board is familiar with the project and the property. It's 40 units of affordable housing on Doctor's Path. It's made up of 10 different townhouses. They're kind of spread out over the property. There's a lot of empty property that's part of the project. But the project was built back in 1982. My clients, DNF Development, took over the property in the early 2000s. The property is subject to a HAP agreement, it's called, which is through HUD, which is basically a housing subsidy. The residents that live there, 40 families have been living there at various lengths, but many of them have been long-term town residents. The interior of the buildings, we were before this board 2 years ago looking for an extension of the existing pilot agreement. The original pilot agreement was a 40-year agreement that was entered back into in 1982 or thereabouts, so it expired in 2021. We came at that time coming to the board asking for a long-term extension. Just big picture, you know, just so you guys are aware, you know, I know typically IDAs look when they finance a project or give financial assistance to a project, a commercial project or a housing project, their you know, the typical mindset is, well, let's give it a 10-year or 15-year or 20-year pilot. That should be enough for them to get the property built and get it stabilized and operational. It's a big difference when you're talking about 100% affordable housing. The 100%, the rents are limited as to the revenue that's coming into this project is limited by regulation, by regulatory agreement. So even if they wanted to raise rents to cover more expenses, they can't do it. It's under the regulatory agreement, the HAP agreement with HUD, and also the regulatory agreement that goes along with the housing. This has to be affordable housing. What that means is that our finances are limited. Where we are right now is that, you know, we've been upkeeping the interior of the apartments. They're all in pretty good shape. As part of the deal with the IDA 2 years ago when we came before you, we're going to invest about $165,000. A lot of that went into interiors. A lot of it's been just kind of the ongoing maintenance. We are subject to inspection by HUD on a periodic basis. They're more than sufficient and, pass that test easily. What we're here to talk about today is an opportunity, we believe, to invest approximately another $1 million into exterior improvements and some interior that will make a drastic difference in the lives of the people who live in the facility and also the surrounding homeowners and the community at large. And those improvements that we're talking about are to put basically new berming up in front with security gates, to re-side all of the structures so they look a lot nicer, to new landscaping and soil fill-in some areas that are uneven, basically to make it aesthetically a lot more pleasing to look at and to live in. Another big improvement that we're looking to do is to do what are called these split units. Everybody has probably seen these where it's a unit that has a compressor outside and it's up there and it basically provides heat and air conditioning. Right now, the residents do not have air conditioning. Some of them do, some of them don't, and they pay for their own utilities. By putting in this improvement, which would be a very modern AC heat system, it would, number one, be green and efficient. Number two, it would add a lot of comfort to the people who live there. And number three, it will reduce their energy costs very significantly by being able to put these in. They are expensive to put in. Full taxes on this property, if there was no pilot in place, would be about $130,000 a year, according to the Riverhead assessor. The pilot that we've been under is in about $70,000, $72,000. If the pilot is not extended, and I will tell you, across Long Island, affordable housing projects like this always, I don't want to say always, everyone I've ever seen always has a pilot on it, because the only way that a project like this can be sustainable from a financial perspective, because the rents are limited, is that they have to have local participation from the municipality in the form of keeping control and stabilization and hopefully lowering of the taxes that are incurred. What we're here to talk about today is a very vivid illustration of why that's necessary. The costs that we're talking about $1 million over a 30-year period, are going to cost about $78,000 to a year to finance. That's going to be the cost that gets added to the budget to do all these improvements. To go back on the tax rolls is probably going to cost about $60,000. That's the difference between what the pilot payment is and what full taxes would be. So we're and I have with me Bruce Peterson, I should mention. He's the CFO of the organization, DNF Development. Each of these projects has to stand on their own. They have to be financially sufficient and sustainable. Either we can, if we don't get an extension of the pilot, that basically uses up the cash flow that would otherwise be available to finance an improvement like this. So, and we've been kicking around this, and we've had a lot of conversations with Tracy and with Bill Weir. It's really a real conundrum. If the expenses go up by going to full taxes on this, there's not going to, that cash flow that otherwise could finance this improvement over a period of time, and that's the way these improvements are funded, would have to be utilized for those taxes. Now, it's already paying $72,000 worth of taxes. It's been like that for over 40 years. It's been slight increases. Our proposal here is to extend this pilot again. We would finance these improvements. We would make a guarantee, a commitment to the idea that these improvements will be made. I think they're the type of improvements that would make a very visual, important difference to not only the people who live there, but to the people of the town and the neighboring community. They're going to see a big difference. It's not beautiful to look at right now, and part of the project problem is that the income is limited. So it's not like, well, if you put in money, you're going to get your money back. It has to be self-sustaining because of the way that the financing structure is put up. And we didn't put that in place, but that is the business of DNF Development. DNF Development has an excellent reputation across Long Island at doing affordable housing projects. It wins awards all over the place. This project has been kind of handicapped because of the pilot structure that's been in place, and if we can get it to continue, there's an opportunity here to make these improvements. So, as I was saying at the beginning, a typical project, a commercial project, you say, look, we need to give it a boost and an incentive in order to make the building happen and get it up and stabilized. With affordable housing, the need for the assistance never goes away because the rent control remains there. So we're under a regulatory agreement where the income is limited, the revenue to the facility is limited, so we don't have the option, unless we're going to, wait out the HAP agreement and turn it into market rate or something like that, which is not going to be good for the people who live there or who are residents of the town. So we are looking to continue to operate the property as 100% affordable. We're looking to extend the HAP agreement It's to keep people who have been living there to continue to live there. The people who live there pay a percentage of their income as their rent, and then basically HUD makes up the difference. We have identified, well, even with the pilot, it's going to cost us more than the pilot savings. As I said, it will cost us $78,000 a year. We get a $60,000 savings. That $18,000 a year is something that the budget can handle, that it can sustain going forward. But without the pilot extension, these improvements are not going to be able to be made. And while we'll stay in compliance, I think it's a missed opportunity for the residents and for, the IDA board, who I know, wants to see, affordable housing kept in as high quality as possible. So that's kind of our pitch as to why we think, we know it's necessary, we can't make the improvements without it, and, we'd hope that, we're looking for a local partner in the town and its IDA, and helping us pretty much maintain the status quo from a revenue perspective to the affected taxing jurisdictions. And we're not looking for any decrease from where we are. So with that being said, I'd take any questions. I have the CFO here if you have any questions for him. I know we're not here necessarily for a decision. The one last thing I would say is that we're under time crunch, and that March 1st is the taxable status date. So we really, if we are going to do anything with you guys, and we're hoping that we will, we have to get it done, I believe, by March 1st and finalized in order to take effect of December 1 of this year. We had as this board knows, we had kind of a catch up with the assessor last time, where the assessor put it back onto the tax rolls for a period of time, and then we had to take it back off, and that was a lot of rigmarole. So we're trying to avoid that situation again here. So with that being said, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Does Mr. Peterson want to add anything to that before we go to questions?
No, I mean, it's just the financial distress that we're in. It's the environment right now with.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm Bruce Peterson. Yeah, it's just the current market conditions. I'm not going to blame COVID or whatever it would be, but it's just hard. The collections aren't there. We're constantly putting tenants in legal, which we don't like to do, but we have to do that. So it's really, we have increased legal expenses, lack of cash flow coming in. It's not making any money. Not that we're just trying to break even. And like Dan said, if we can do these improvements, it's just going to be. We're looking for some relief, or at least keep the consistency of where the pilot is today. I know it's grown from 36,000, I think, over the years, and incrementally went up to 72, where I think we're at today. We're looking to see if we can keep it along those lines.
All right, thank you. Questions from the board?
How does HUD calculate what they pay for you? I mean, from my understanding is they determine a fair market value for the particular region that the project is in, and then the tenants pay a set amount, percentage amount of their income.
Yes.
Is it 30%?
30% of their income. So every year we go through a recertification. They certify their income again, and whatever their income would be, they would pay 30%, and the HAP contract, the housing
Right.
assistance payment, would be paying the differential.
Right, and so it's regionally based, so that Long Island, because of its high cost, would necessarily be receiving more funds, say, than Virginia
Ohio.
or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay, so they're taking into account the market rate, the market conditions in this region specifically,
For the local jurisdiction.
for what
Yes.
they pay you for each of those units.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
If you add amenities such as air conditioning, will that market rate that HUD pays go up?
No, because they get a tenant allowance for their electricity, so they pay their own electric, but they get an allowance, a discount.
Not the utilities, just the fact that there's the amenity that's being added to the units.
That won't change their rent at all.
Okay, and what about if the taxes go up?
That
HUD
won't change their rents at all.
No, it won't change their
It
rents, but
won't.
what will it change, will it change on HUD's end? So I've got to assume that if these things increase, that there is a mechanism by which HUD will increase its portion or the unit, the per unit
Yeah.
contribution that they're making.
What we would have to do is what they call a mark-to-market analysis, and it can be done every 5 years, I believe, which you'll justify all your expenses to HUD, and show them, okay, this is what it costs to operate the property, and this is what we need in subsidy to break
Right.
even, in a sense.
Right, okay.
When would that next review be?
I don't know what the cycle is. I think I mean, like Dan mentioned, we have our annual inspections, but I'd have to see when the mark-to-market opportunity. I remember doing one a few years back, so it's probably coming up soon.
Wouldn't it happen concurrently with the end of the existing HAP, which is the end of this year?
It can or it should. If this is the end of the contract, we most likely will be going for that mark-to-market with the renewal.
Okay.
That does not necessarily fund an improvement like what we're talking about. That would just keep it at a
Right, but
regular level.
Right.
Right, but I've got to think also that HUD would require you to make certain improvements on an ongoing basis to maintain,
Yeah, if there's any deficiencies in the property,
Right.
they will note them, and those will be something that would be hanging over our head until they would be rectified.
right.
So they'll give us a
So
list.
there's they expect when they come to
Yes.
inspect, they would expect that it would be in fine and working condition, all of the,
So that's an important point, though, is that these are not bringing it up to code or up to spec. The improvements that we're talking about are, I don't want to call them extra, but they're things that are going to make the property nicer that HUD is not necessarily going to look to happen or look to fund. So, this is why I say it's kind of a missed opportunity, because if the money starts going to taxes, HUD is not going to have us put security gates in there. HUD's not going to have us put in those units. It's the property, the financial spreadsheet of the property, of the project is not going to allow it to finance that and pay for it.
right, but in essence, we're talking about landscaping and AC units here. That's what you're proposing to do.
And the siding.
And
on it.
re-siding.
Right.
Just the whole
I'm
landscape.
really sorry to interrupt, but you're being recorded, so you need to get in front of the microphone, because this is a public meeting,
Okay.
okay? Sorry about that.
Just repeat what he says. Lost my train of thought, sorry. Sorry. Oh, yes, so it's really about the curb appeal that we're trying to do on the outside. We're looking to put a nice fence, a big white horse fence on the outside, and prohibit the residents from driving their vehicles onto the grass and onto the property, which just is not right and diminishes the whole appeal of it. So if we could get that, we'll stop that from happening, and it'll be more presentable, so when you're driving down Doctor's Path, you say, wow, look at that, it's a pretty nice place. That's what we would love to have.
And also, too, the project originally got a 40-year pilot agreement that was not done through the IDA, but was done through the town board at that time. That's the longest we,
Right.
as a
1982.
collective group, have ever seen
Right.
any pilot agreement made. And it was specifically outlined in that original agreement that that was going to be the end, that it was a 40-year pilot, the end. And so that the current owners, when they took over the project in 2005, knew that that was a term and a condition of the project, so. I just wanted to bring that up
yeah.
for the,
Yeah, no, and that is true, and, in the 1980s, because I've done these projects all around Long Island, that was under, as you point out, the private housing finance law that the town boards would actually grant instead of the IDA. And those have come due all across Long Island to a project that have all been renewed through the IDA, through IDA pilots, which arguably is a different program or a different pilot. And it's because they cannot sustain themselves on the, they can't sustain themselves if they're paying full taxes. That's the problem. And ultimately what happens is that, the quality of life for people who live there ends up going down because the money is stretched thinner and thinner. And that's why I say this is an opportunity. And, one of the things that, when you're building a new affordable housing project, they always say that, a lot of times the state and federal government are giving their subsidies through, through tax credits, et cetera, and they look for the local participation to be in the form of a pilot, where you're getting maybe less taxes than you would fully get in order to help make the project financially sustainable, so you can get less rent than you might get on the open market and make this available for people that, I guess, can't afford it.
But you've had the pilot for 42 years, and now you're asking for another 30 years.
Yeah.
And I don't see how these pilots can go on in perpetuity, which is at 72 years, extraordinary to say the least. And so I have to tell you that I'm wrestling certainly with a pilot that's going to be 72 years. And while I'm certainly sympathetic, you know, to the housing over there, I don't believe necessarily that vinyl siding, you know, and landscaping is necessarily worthy of a 30-year pilot. We don't give 30-year pilots to begin with, at least not since that I'm aware of. And if I were to ask you what the benefits to the other residents, how many permanent jobs will it create? You know, the things that we ask typically of people who make presentations. How many temporary jobs, how many permanent jobs, what will it add to the economy, and all of those things. I'm not going to run through that because I know what the answer is.
Zero.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's because this is a different type of, this is affordable housing.
Understood,
Yeah.
and so taking that into account, understanding that, I'm still wrestling with the fact that what you're asking for amounts to a 72-year pilot. And I'm not sure whether or not the benefit outweighs the harm to the loss of the revenue for the rest of the residents of Riverhead, especially with a school district that's bursting at the seams and things of that nature, and infrastructure concerns that everyone has. So I can tell you that those are certainly concerns that I have with respect to the
No, and those are obviously very legitimate concerns. What I would say is that we're not talking about building new housing, which I think you could, maybe those arguments could be stronger about the school district, et cetera. These are existing families that are already here. In order, and it is unfortunate that they said 40 years and now we're asking for 30 years, and you're not wrong to say it's 72 years. I would say that projects like this should have a different tax structure that should allow them to be sustainable going forward, instead of having to come to a board every number of years and getting an extension of a pilot agreement. It should just be a permanent thing, that if you're having an affordable housing project where the developer/owner can't charge whatever he wants, he's limited by government as to what he can collect in rents, that and everything's an open book. Financially, it's all an open book. Everyone can look at it. Well, how does this work? If this is the only rent that you get, okay, you can pay your utilities, you can pay your taxes, your pilot, but if you pay everything, there's very little profit. It's probably break even, this one. And, at the end of the day, to make a curb appeal project, as Bruce called it, which I think is probably accurate, it's certainly not building a new building that's going to create tremendous employment opportunities, just basically make it a nicer place. And I point out, not only for the residents there, but also for hopefully people driving by. I mean, that's the problem with a project like this, is it's hard to get capital to put into the project unless there's a way to pay for that capital to come into it. A private sector developer is not going to do that because there's no return on it. So it's kind of looking for everybody to kind of pull together and figure out a way to make it make sense to put this money into it.
And again, I'm certainly sympathetic, but those are good arguments for perhaps a committee of the state or of the federal government in terms of, that type of relief, and I'm not sure that I would disagree with it. It just puts the Riverhead IDA in a position where our normal evaluations of projects is certainly a difficult ask.
Well, I would suggest, and I hear 30 years, that is what we would like to see, and because we're looking at taking a 30-year loan out to do this. Hopefully, there's going to be other events in the future, maybe potential recapitalizations going forward, but, if you would consider a shorter term than 30 years, I think we would basically take whatever we could get,
Have you looked into any federal grants along the line?
No, we don't know of any.
In the way the federal government is handing out money,
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
it's got to be subsidized.
I haven't heard of any sources that would be used for this project, for this.
Aren't there other codified tax relief mechanisms for affordable housing is it a 485? No? Nothing?
581.
581?
Yeah, that,
I mean, there are other projects in town. I'm just wondering if there is another mechanism.
well, that is one, like you mentioned, the 581A.
Okay.
It's what I find, it's up to the assessor. The assessor does whatever he wants when it comes to a 581. So we really were looking for something that's fixed and locked and, maybe increases by a percentage, because I find if you asked 5 different assessors, one case, you're gonna get 5 different answers on how they're gonna value it, and that's not really, I don't know.
So, yeah, so we, our firm does tax analysis, and we did a 581 analysis based upon the income and expenses, and it's pretty much coming out to where the assessor's saying the taxes would be. So in other words, that program by itself, we've had experiences in other jurisdictions where, as Bruce said, it's been very arbitrary, and sometimes the numbers are higher than what we feel full taxes would be. But in this case, it seems to come out to about $130,000 a year. Now, if the assessor thought that she could come up with $72,000 a year, obviously, that would be fine with us, then we wouldn't need a pilot. But we're looking for the certainty,
Well,
There are 40 units, are they equally built as far as the
Yeah,
format, 2-bedroom, 2-bath?
Yes, yeah, there are 10 identical buildings, yes.
What's the square footage of each unit?
Oh, I'm gonna say about 750 feet.
So it's going to cost about $34 a foot per unit,
Oh, I didn't do the math.
$25,500 a unit to renovate?
That's a fair number.
Okay. And on the assumption for the financing, what are the,
It was about $1 million we were looking at.
right, at like what rate, just this refinance?
Yes,
So the project is paid for?
yes,
Okay. And this is just what, a fixed rate, 30-year?
pretty much, yes, correct.
I'm sorry.
At 6.5%, which we couldn't even get nowadays.
Yeah.
Wish we
Sorry,
could.
Mr. Peterson, did you say that the building's all debt-free at the moment?
Oh, no, I didn't say it, no,
Oh,
we
I thought
have,
that's,
no, there's
I didn't think
3.8
so.
million of debt
I
on
think
it.
there's three and change.
Yeah, 3.8, I believe, is the number
oh,
of
okay.
debt.
Misunderstood. Okay, thank you.
One question, Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
I take it you were in place in, when was it, 2005, was it, or thereabouts that you invested in this property?
Yeah, I didn't join the company until 2008, so
okay.
which is pretty long now.
I'm just wondering whether, when they, well, you may not have been privy to it, but I would have been interested to know in the investment decision process, exactly what sort of pilot they anticipated, in that it would have been about 15 years to run, I think, on that pilot, or a little bit longer than that, I suppose. And I would have thought that any analysis would have run out beyond that, regardless of what we think of models of that nature.
Right.
And whether there was an anticipation that there was going to be the ability to extend the pilot in that investment process.
Yeah, I can't say what was determined back in the beginning there. I don't know.
Just to speak to that. Yeah, so as I indicated before, not only DNF, but other clients of ours who have these type of projects that had the private housing finance law 40-year pilots from the 1980s, because there seemed to have been a lot of them at that time, they all came due, and as I say, we probably had at least 7 or 8 that I can think of where they were renewed by an IDA came in, looked at it and said, all right, here's the finances of it. We can see that if that $30,000 a year has to go for taxes, then it can't go over here to do this. We believe that it's warranted in order, because of the regulatory agreement that's impacting and regulating and keeping the income down, that the pilot should be extended, or a new pilot should be granted to extend off of the private housing finance law. So I think in the industry, and I can't say what Len and Peter were thinking at the time, but consistently, these projects, I think the general thought is, well, if communities want to continue with affordable housing, then they're going to have to continue with this level of local participation, because if the local participation through a pilot goes away, the property doesn't stand on its own, and then something has to change. The worst-case scenario is the property ends up going downhill slightly because it doesn't have the right maintenance. The other thing could be to wait for HAP agreements to expire and try and revamp the property as a market-rate housing, knock those down and build something else. There's other options that could happen, but I think, that is not what their business is, and that's not what we want to see here. These are people, 40 families that have lived in the town for a long time, who call this their home.
Getting back, though, to the earlier questions and some of your responses on that HAP agreement and so forth, if in fact we're really coming to a conclusion on the original agreement, what efforts have you made to actually discuss with HUD your proposals, and whether or not they would be, if anticipated by HUD, would result in an adjustment to the HAP agreement and permit the whole thing to be effectively covered by HUD?
Well, so and I'm going to let you speak in a minute on this, because you probably know more than I do, but my understanding is that the HAP agreements pretty much are routinely extended, right? So as long as you're continuing you know, if it's a good operator, a good project, it's not like we're worried about whether or not they're going to give us another 5 years, and another 5 years, and another 5 years. I think from what I understand you're saying, what I've seen other places, that the mark-to-market idea is that you're not so much asking them, like, we want to make these improvements, so therefore we need more money. You're basically, the argument would be that the rents that you're saying are market rents are too low, and that the market rent should be higher, and that if you can get it higher, then maybe that frees up some more cash flow in order to make an improvement like this. So I don't think, unless I'm wrong, do you?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so, you know, I don't think that you'd go to HUD and say, we'd like to put $1 million in here, can you increase the amount that you pay under the HAP agreement? Because their analysis is not that, their analysis is, you know, is the project passing inspections, so it's adequate housing? And then number two is, you know, what is the market rent that the landlord should be getting in the area? And for whatever reason, you know, it seems that these projects, even with quote-unquote market rent, still always seem to be, you know, break even at best.
I understand your response, but I'm a little bit confused, simply because, and not to, if I were engaged in the project, I would have thought that a discussion with HUD in anticipation of the end of the HAP agreement at the end of this year would begin to unearth whether or not you're going to get the support you might need, rather than turning to this agency.
Yeah, but, we will, I'm sure, get a HAP contract renewed. I've been in this business in affordable housing since the mid-'80s, and not once, and I was an auditor before I started as the CFO, not once did I ever see a HAP agreement not extended. So I know we are going through the next extension, but that's, I don't know how we're going to get that to fund the additional taxes. Again, they're going to go to the market and say, okay, this is what the rents are comparable to be to support your expenses. We could certainly put it in the budget and say, okay, we've lost our exemption, and see how that goes. But we'll have to do, again, we'll have to do an analysis.
Any further questions, Tony?
Chairman?
Lauren?
Chairman, I have questions.
Okay.
First, I just want to remind the board that financial applications don't necessarily have to be for all of the benefits. You may opt to approve a sales tax exemption for the project, or real property, and/or all. What are the current rent ranges now?
I don't have it off the top of my head. I'd have to get back to you and look at that up.
And when you came before the board 2 years ago for the extension, there were efforts to be made to actually add an additional mix of different kinds of units as the town seeks to provide different variations of housing. Can you speak to at all the efforts that were made and where that went, Dan?
I mean, we just did improvements to the units, just floors. I don't know of any changing of, like what you're referring to, changing of the units.
Yeah, we had,
Oh, okay.
so, yeah, there was some exploration, because there's extra acreage there. It's kind of clustered onto
that's
one part of the property. So we had meetings, this was 2 years ago, with the town supervisor at the time, and also the head of community development. And the feedback that we got was that there was not going to be a tolerance for adding additional density onto the property. So, I mean, that would be another answer here, but you know, that's more development, you know, which we would like to do, but it didn't seem like the town wanted to see that.
I also want to remind the board that pilots don't necessarily include an exemption. And we have, Lee, you're a new member, fairly new. We did do a pilot that was actually an exemption for 15 years, but the pilot, to be consistent with tax credits, was out to almost 30 years, but it didn't provide necessarily an exemption. I just wanted to remind the board that. And what security measures are at the property now?
We have security cameras throughout the property, and there's no security guards, but there's just security cameras, which are piped into the local office that are viewed regularly on cameras.
Those were all my questions.
Anything further from the board?
I just mention again for the board's information that at our last governance committee meeting, the governance committee did recommend that the full board consider a sales tax exemption
That's correct.
only.
That's
That
correct.
was their recommendation.
The problem is that without the pilot, there's no project that we need sales tax exemption for. That's the problem, so.
Okay.
Well, if there's no further questions or comments from the board at this time, I think this has been a good conversation, and I think maybe the board should discuss matters a little bit further.
Bill? So Lenape has made a presentation, and at this point, given the timeline necessary for this project's consideration in the taxable status state, what action, if anything, does this board need to take this evening in order to be timely?
I think if the board was, in order to, as we said, approve something at the next board meeting before the tax status date, the board would have to accept the application today and authorize multiple vote here.
Authorize what?
You would have to,
At the next meeting, if Tracy prepares a pilot, the board could, adopt an authorizing resolution, and the public hearing, authorize an extension of the lease, and implementation of the new pilot. So the first thing that has to be today is accept the application, authorize all the public hearing.
did you hear that?
Generally.
There's a lot of feedback on the hearing.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. We lost audio again for hearing. We can't hear you, but through the computer, so.
I think essentially, Bill is saying that if we really want to get something done under the timeline, we'd have to make some decisions tonight.
Correct.
Which I would just point out, that doesn't bind you at all. It would be to accept the application, he said, and to allow a public hearing to go forward, which
Exactly.
keeps the option open. You could still say no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, how does the board feel about that? We'd have to, thinking about it now. I'd like to make a motion. See how I want to phrase this. Trying to think how to do it in this positive
Bill, do you have any guidance for the?
I think I'd like to make a motion that the board consider accepting an application and considering a public hearing,
Or authorizing all public
or authorizing a public hearing on the matter. Would anybody
Do you have a
I'll
second?
second it.
I would not vote for it.
I would not vote for it.
You would not vote for it? Tony? No. That's 5 nays.
Can you hold on? So, Jim, you motioned to move to accept the application and authorize a public hearing, and Anthony seconded?
Yes,
Okay, and you're doing a vote now?
we did. We voted no,
Okay.
all of us
Oh.
unanimously.
Well, that's that. So hopefully, maybe we can work with your good offices to help with the assessor and the 581A analysis, that maybe we can get that to a level where we can do something. I mean, these guys are good operators, so, I appreciate your consideration. I don't agree with your decision, but I accept it, and, we'll figure out what we're gonna do. So, it's a big part of the town, so thank you very much.
Appreciate
We'll
your
certainly
hesitation.
do whatever we can to help, Dan.
Okay, I have to leave.
Right. That brings us to the treasurer's report, Lee.
So as of December 31st, 2022, The balance in the checking account was $49,930.07. In the money market account was $45,039.60, which reflects interest earned of $3.82. The revenues for the month included interest earnings of $13.18, collection fees from LDC of $750, pilot splitting fees of $1,750, and a refinance fee of $4,000.
Thank you. Any questions from the board on the report? All right, thanks very much, Lou. There are no committee reports tonight, correct?
Correct.
All right. There is no old business tonight, Tracy?
Correct.
And there's no new business tonight?
Correct.
Correct. And that brings us to the executive director's report.
There is one of those.
That's what I thought.
Conveniently.
So we did receive an estimated assessment from the Board of Assessors on Restaurant Depot.
Ah, okay, good.
Therefore, we will be calling a public hearing for the next meeting. Again, we have a time schedule now for the taxable status date in order to process these applications and close them before March 1st. So there will be a notice for the February meeting. HK Ventures is working through their secret process and will, Bill, did we tentatively schedule them for the February meeting as well? HK Ventures? I'm trying to recall.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Okay.
They may also be on.
All right.
The compliance reports were all mailed out, and they're due back February 14th from all the companies. Sales tax reminders for the sales tax reports will go out the end of this week. They're due to the state by February 28th with a copy to our office. You may have noticed in the local media that Riverhead Cider was applying for, it's not a physical extension in addition to what's already there. Apparently this is
Approval of an extension they
approval
already
of
made.
a prior, correct. I'm still verifying that, just to make sure, but we pretty much know that it was stuff that's already been processed through this office. It was just written a little misleading. And then I forwarded you a legislative update that Governor Hochul signed into law. And I think I've noted that we pretty much do everything that they already asked for, with the exception of a certified copy to the superintendent of schools. So I'll just briefly list them. They want us to send copies of certain resolutions, return receipt, which we already do. We notify the taxing jurisdictions individually, return receipt. And I used to just notify the superintendent by regular mail because it saved us $8. We will now spend the $8 to do certified mail. We also already send the pilot notifications via notification of the 412A to all the taxing jurisdictions and the assessor's office. It includes the end date, but they are now requiring us to notify the taxing jurisdictions 2 years prior to the end date of the pilot, but we send it way before that. And if there's any modification in between, we also notify them already. So none of this so far is really anything new to this agency, but Bill and Terrence are also preparing a memo, I believe, and we'll double check to make sure we're in compliance with anything that's new. If you have anything to add, Bill or Terrence, you can.
No, you guys are already doing best practices. This legislation doesn't really have any significant impact on it.
Okay. Good to hear.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned at 6:01 PM. And with that, I would now like to turn to calling to order the Riverhead IDA Economic Job Development Corporation Annual Meeting on January 17th, 2023 at 6:01 PM. And I would ask the board to consider the agenda and to ask a motion to approve it.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Approval of the minutes. I would like the board to consider for approval the minutes of the last meeting, which was November 7th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of November 7th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
I did.
I think similar to our last meeting, I'd like to just list the organizational resolutions that we would seek to approve tonight. The appointment of officers, Resolution 02-23A. The appointment of committees, Resolution 02-23B. The appointment of counsel, CFO, and auditors, Resolution 03-23A and B. An authorization in the endorsements of the depository, Resolution 404-23. And a ratification of the authorization to publish our meeting dates, which is Resolution 05-23. All those in favor, could I have a motion to approve those resolutions?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, who was second? Thank you.
And that brings us to the treasurer's report.
Tracy, I don't believe I have the treasurer's report.
It's on the cover
Buried
page
in
of
the other
the
one, sure.
IDA financials, last sentence, should be.
Thank you. The balance in the LDC bank account as of December 31st, 2022 was $261.63. During the month, we had a wire transfer to the Riverhead Charter School in the amount of $89,593.38, and there was interest of $1.74 was credited to the account on December 30th, 2022.
Any questions?
Nope.
All right, thank you very much, Lee. No committee reports tonight, if I understand correctly.
Can you vote on that?
Oh, okay. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 06-23, the treasurer's report?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No committee reports?
That's correct.
Old business. Do you want to tell us anything about this?
Yeah, so that's just ratification of the publish and posting of the meetings, which we do concurrently with the IDA posting. We didn't have a meeting for the LDC, so
All right. May I have a motion to approve Resolution 07-23?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And that brings us to new business. And this, I guess, Tracy, is effectively the identical resolution to that we approved for the IDA on virtual meetings?
yes, so actually, that is for the next meeting. I gave you the extensive resolution that we'll adopt after the public hearing.
Okay.
So you really just need to motion to authorize a public hearing for the policy,
All right.
and that's it.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Lee.
Lee?
And with that, a motion to adjourn, please.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. And I'd like to call into this meeting at 6:05 PM.
Good meeting.
I believe that covers our